Hello tanks and tankettes, welcome to a view replay. This is DaWeylen and he's in his E100. Now, his clan tag says QSFX, he's actually now in the Duckster clan, so you might surmise from that this is an older replay, and it is. It's from just the end of last year, it's a 9.4 replay, so before the recent accuracy changes came in, but I don't really think that's going to be a factor in what happens in this replay. It might be a very minor one, but not enough to be really worth going on about. So the reason I picked this one out is, well, it's actually twofold. I very recently put up a replay of my own in the E100 where I was talking about my struggles with the 15cm gun, how I am finding it not the easiest gun in the world to use. There's also an older replay from December which is also relevant, but I'm not going to mention the specifics of that because that would slightly give away what's going to happen in this one. So we'll come back to that. So this is top tier, it's Redshire. There are two top tier arties on each side. No, in the game, they're not on each side. There's one on each side, which, you know, 1 + 1 = 2. I can do that much sometimes. Our team has the Conch GC, their team has the 155-58, the auto-loading Batchat arty. And that might be a bad thing if he decides to focus DaWeylen, but we'll see. He may or may not. I mean, DaWeylen's obviously a very tempting target in an E100, so depending what the arty does, that could influence things somewhat. Otherwise, the matchmaking is really good. There are a fairly even mix of tier 8s, tier 9s and tier 10s in this one. It's about a third each, and that is good for the tier 10s because there are lots of things they can farm, essentially, if the lower tiers are incautious, not playing very well. And it's good for this gun with its comparatively low penetration. So this is like the heavy corner of Redshire, essentially. Artillery always makes this worlds more difficult. But it depends on the number of artillery and it depends on the focus of artillery. Now, that shot there was, I don't know, a bit hasty. You're never going to pen the front of an E75 with this gun's AP, unless you get exceptionally lucky. I think you'd have to hit the commander's hatch, really. But anyway, the E75 was unfortunately able to tag him back on the commander's bar. But that right there, that was a considerably more lucky shot. And DaWeylen, in the actual replay description himself, freely acknowledges he had some very lucky moments in this game, and I think we'll count that as one of them. Now, of course, the alpha of this gun means that the 110, if he'd been able to shoot the guy twice, potentially he still could have killed him with 2 shots instead of 1, but even so, to start off with an ammo rack, that's quite nice. Gonna be a little frustrating for the 110, of course. I mean, that does occasionally happen, the first shot that hits you ammo racks you, but you've made somebody's day, you know, even if that happens to you. Not that it's usually much consolation. Anyway, he spotted that behind him, this Object 432 has decided to try and flank round behind them, which, you know, in a medium tank is the thing to do. The Tiger 2 has engaged, but not only is that Tiger 2 low health, but he's also stock. And DaWeylen, I mean, you could see this as he's just coming in to farm some damage against this guy, but the Tiger 2 would have died, well, did die anyway, but he would have died against that medium, and at that point they would have had shots coming in from both directions. They would have been fighting against all that massive tanks to their front, and also being shot in the behinds by that Object 432. So actually, it was as much about self-preservation as it was about getting some more damage, because you don't want to ever be caught in that kind of like pincer situation where you've got shots coming in from both sides and you just can't do anything about it. However, they are outnumbered here. This is not good. They seem to be outnumbered from the start anyway, but they've lost one of the E75s that was with them, and the other one's quite low health. However, DaWeylen has got a fair chunk of his hit points left, as does that IS-7, so the fact that the enemies here, they're not really using their numbers advantage. We could count this as another element of luck. Maybe they were thinking their artillery would do the work for them, but it's not really working out that way. I mean, the enemy E100 is the furthest back of any of them right now. He should be at the front. The low health IS-7 seems to be at least trying to do something. That Death Star tried for a snapshot, it didn't work out, which is fortunate for our IS-7. And that's one of the frustrations of playing the Death Star, is that sometimes you need to make those snapshots and it just doesn't work. You just fire it into the ground or into a wreck or whatever. And yes, that was friendly artillery that just splashed our team. Yes. Well done, that Conk GC. Now, the 183 makes this rather inexplicable decision. He must have been loaded, and yet maybe he thought he'd try and get side and rear armor. But it's not like... I mean, maybe he thought he'd provide distraction, or that DaWeylen would be distracted enough that he wouldn't turn his tank to shoot at him. But he did, and he was. And he died for it. DaWeylen, again, a little bit lucky because he got a high enough roll to kill that 183. So finally he's taken a bit more substantial damage. He's taken a penetrating hit from that E100, who really was not, like... DaWeylen's been doing it right. This enemy E100 hasn't. And in fact, he did it very, very wrong there, because he actually made it so much easier. The first shot DaWeylen took into that guy's lower front plate was kind of lucky for DaWeylen that it penned, because it was against the angled lower front plate. That time the enemy E100 was not only facing him dead on, but he actually angled his tank slightly so that it negated his frontal plate armor. And that made him, like that third shot, that was an easy kill at that point. So, I thought initially, watching this replay, the 55-58, when he fired that shot, finally fired that first shot at DaWeylen, that was it. DaWeylen was now going to get focused by Arty. Instead, their enemy 58 decided to farm a kill and went after that low health E75. So that's another point of luck, that the enemy 55-58 seemed more interested in farming kills, at least at that particular moment, than actually playing smart and taking out the more dangerous tank, the higher health, bigger gunned E100, and instead he went for that E75, who would have been an easy kill for any of the remaining tanks on his team. Who knows? This is about to be another lucky shot. Relatively well aimed. The Tiger II clearly didn't move, but even so, at that range with this gun, yes. And no, that's not good. That's not good at all. That's a 51-20. And he's just taken a hit, and this guy could end him. But, again, his luck holds. He manages to track the guy, and the friendly T-54 actually finishes him off, because he was never going to reload in time. With the reload on this gun, over 17 seconds, the 51-20 could have sat and aimed at his vision bar, and that would have been it. So he, again, freely acknowledges that without his T-54, without his teammates, that particular instance, he probably would have been stuffed. So we can count that as luck as well, maybe. The fact that he tracked that 51-20, the fact that the T-54 was actually paying attention. So +1 to the team there. That was a good element of a good example of a bit of teamwork happening in a random battle. Meanwhile, have you noticed DaWeylen's damage count? 8,444, and that's not the total either. That's not the grand total, because he killed that Tiger II blind. The Tiger II just disappeared off the radar when he killed the guy. So there's at least an extra couple hundred damage on top of that. It might be as high as 9,000. I didn't quite see what the Tiger II's remaining health was. But we're getting towards some pretty decent damage numbers now. I mean, this is already pretty decent damage numbers, but there are still tanks left alive, and that's a full health T-62A. But first off, he wants to see if he can kill artillery, because we all do. I think that's just one of those things that if you see an arty, you want to shoot an arty. Sometimes even if it's on your own team. Fortunately, that sort of thing doesn't happen very often, because it just gets you banned. But still, occasionally you see someone on a Conqueror gun carriage and you just think, ugh. Anyway, the noose is closing around this remaining tank. I mean, he's just trying to stay alive, trying to do a bit more damage. And, oh my word, that was a lucky shot. That was not fully aimed. That was a T-62A on the move, and it tracked him. Unfortunately, there's no one there to take advantage of that tracking, and he's never going to reload in time, but still, that was definitely, like, that does not happen that often with this gun. Now, he tries his luck again, but unfortunately, in doing so, in sitting there, he basically had straightened out his tank and made it easier for the T-62A to hurt it. But there are now multiple tanks closing up in on this guy's position. I mean, he's now got threats from multiple directions to deal with. So, although he could potentially, if I'm remembering correctly, the Alpha on the T-62A, he could potentially one-shot DaWeylen if he rolls high. He could definitely one-shot that T-54. The fact that there are 3 of them around this guy, oh, there we go, it takes out the T-71, means that his days are numbered. And don't forget, we've still got artillery left alive. There's a Leopard PTA, Foch 155 and an IS-3 also all closing in on this position. So, quite fortunately, none of them decided, hey, let's cap, because that would be quite annoying. Although, less likely to happen in this scenario. And the final shot on the move, just... he saw the PTA going in to try and sneakily get that kill, so I think he figured he had nothing to lose at that point, took the shot, and it worked perfectly. So that was an ace mastery, steel wall, high caliber, top gun, bunch of the minor medals and ribbons, and he did quite well. Now remember that blind shot? Well, that plus the damage he did at the end there pushed him to just over the 10,000 damage mark. For his efforts, he got 1,568 base XP, and the only person on the rest of his team that also did an appreciable amount of damage was actually the Conqueror GC, unsurprisingly. For his efforts, I mean, the actual final reward screen, 14,000 XP with a ×5 and a premium account, and over 100,000 credits profit. Even with the repair costs, even with the ammo costs. So that was alright. And remember at the start how I mentioned another E100 replay from back in December? Well, the reason it's relevant is because that game was also a 10k damage game. It was, what was the guy's name? Nexos, I think. And he was in a scenario where it was fjords, his team collapsed very rapidly, and he basically fired a lot of heat ammo. A lot. And that video garnered a somewhat mixed reaction, understandably, and I thought it was still an impressive result. But this was a very different sort of match, and as you may have noticed, DaWeylen didn't fire a single round of heat. He accomplished all of that with just AP ammo, and from that 15cm gun, I think that's a reasonably good achievement. And he says himself this was his highest ever damage game, and you'd be hard pressed to top that. 10.2k damage. I mean, that was quite impressive, and the fact that he managed it, despite them being outnumbered on that flank, despite all the rest of it, yeah, that was quite an impressive result. And yeah, there were lucky moments, but as ever, you always have to, like, it's up to you to capitalize on those lucky moments. It's up to you to make the most of them. You can't just rely on getting lucky. You actually have to apply some brain power as well, and take those opportunities and take those chances that the game and the enemy team sometimes give you. So it's not all just OMG he was so lucky. Sometimes you have to do stuff as well in order to make the most of it, to turn what was a good game there and taking those lucky moments and making it into a really great game as it turned out. So I can dream that someday I might replicate this result in my own E100, but it's probably not likely. I'm more likely to do it in the mouse, actually. I have seen a 10k mouse game on somebody else's channel. It required the most bizarre circumstances to happen, but it did happen. So, who knows? Maybe that's something I should be aiming for. So, anyway, if you enjoyed this game, you can leave any comments below, you can hit the like button, you can subscribe to my channel, and as always, stay tuned for more.